Imagine this. You wake up, shower, commute to work, sit down at your desk, and start the job you were hired to do. It pays okay. The people around you aren't toxic. The office is decent. Your boss? Not a tyrant. On paper, everything checks out. But by lunchtime, there's this strange weight in your chest, a subtle tension in your shoulders. It's not panic, not depression, just a quiet, steady sense that something deep inside is slowly fading. You look at the clock more than your actual work. You catch yourself zoning out, wondering what it would feel like to just walk away and never come back. Not because of a meltdown, but because part of you just doesn't want to be here anymore. And yet, you stay. Because that's what you're supposed to do, right? You show up, you grind, you earn your keep, you act like everything's fine. But what if you're not the problem? What if you're not lazy or ungrateful or just not disciplined enough? What if the truth is this? You're trapped in a system that was never built to respect your soul, a structure that rewards productivity, not purpose, performance, not passion. We've been raised to believe that working hard is noble, that discipline is virtue, that showing up day after day, even when it chips away at your spirit, is how you become responsible. But if that's true, then why do so many people quietly admit, "I hate what I do, and I don't even know why"? Peter Drucker once said, "People aren't lazy, they just have impotent goals, goals that don't move them, that don't light them up." And that's exactly what modern work has become, a factory of lifeless goals dressed up as ambition. You're not exhausted because you can't handle the pace. You're exhausted because you're spending 40+ hours a week pursuing outcomes that mean nothing to you. You're trading your energy, your creativity, your life for things you can't connect to. And here's the part nobody really tells you. The system isn't broken. It's working exactly as intended. It extracts, it consumes, it uses your labor, your compliance, and your silence. And when you start to crack, you're told it's on you. You're not trying hard enough. You're not being positive enough. You're not grateful. But maybe, just maybe, that ache you feel, that low buzz of dissatisfaction, isn't dysfunction. It's a signal, a quiet cry from the part of you that refuses to be buried. The part Carl Jung called the self, your real self. The one that existed before society handed you a script and said, "Follow this." See, Jung said something powerful. He warned that living through a false self, a mask, doesn't lead to success. It leads to soul splitting, fragmentation, a kind of emotional and spiritual breaking you don't see in the mirror but feel in every part of your being. And that's where this story really begins. What's breaking isn't just your motivation, it's your connection to who you actually are. Jung gave us language for this invisible fracture. He called it the split between the self and the persona. The self is the real you, the raw, unfiltered, creative being you were before the world got involved. The persona, that's the mask you wear to fit in, the character you play at work, in meetings, in emails. It's who you become to survive the game. And in most workplaces today, that persona isn't just encouraged, it's mandatory. You smile when you're drained. You say yes when you mean no. You polish your words, your look, your tone, until you're not even sure what's real anymore. You show up polished, professional, and hollow. You're not rewarded for being real. You're rewarded for being predictable. And slowly, the line between who you are and who you pretend to be starts to blur. You forget what you love. You doubt your instincts. You wonder if your soul ever even existed at all. And it doesn't hit all at once. It creeps in. You start to feel tense in meetings. You can't switch off, even after hours. Your weekends are filled with anxiety about Monday. You see someone living freely and feel this strange envy you can't explain. That's not just stress, that's fragmentation. Jung said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." And in today's world, that's not just terrifying, it's risky. Because full authenticity doesn't always fit the job description. It's not always on brand. The system doesn't want you whole. It wants you manageable. It's not a glitch, it's the design. And studies back this up. A 2022 MBTI report found that people who work in roles misaligned with their core personality are nearly 3 times more likely to report burnout and chronic anxiety. Not because they're weak, but because they're working against their nature. And that's the true cost of this system. It's not just emotional burnout, it's soul erosion. The deeper tragedy is this. The erosion of your soul isn't some accidental side effect of work. It's baked into the very foundation of modern labor. See, today's office job, with its tight schedules, endless metrics, and constant optimization, has roots that go way back to the Industrial Revolution. Before that, people worked with their hands, on their land, connected to what they produced. But then came factories. And factories needed humans to be more like machines. That's when a man named Frederick Winslow Taylor stepped in. He wasn't interested in your creativity. He wasn't concerned with purpose. Taylor was obsessed with efficiency. He studied workers like they were tools, breaking down every motion, every minute, every breath to maximize output. And from that obsession, the idea of scientific management was born, a system where your value is measured not by your depth or spirit, but by how well you perform in a task, again and again, without complaint. Under Taylorism, you're not a person. You're a part. Replaceable, controllable, predictable. And that mindset didn't vanish with the rise of tech. It evolved. Now, we don't just clock in, we log into dashboards, KPIs, email trackers, Slack response times. We're monitored, nudged, optimized, and performance reviewed at every turn. But none of that is designed to see you. It's designed to measure you. Carl Jung would have called this the final stage of alienation, when your work has no connection to your soul, and you keep moving not because you believe in the destination, but because the machine demands momentum. You stop asking, "Does this matter to me?" and start asking, "Will this get me promoted?" That's when your identity collapses into a spreadsheet. The system loves people who fit the culture. But let's be honest, culture fit is often just a polite way of saying, you're easy to manage. You won't challenge the hierarchy, you won't ruffle feathers, you'll follow the script, wear the mask, play your part, and in return, you get stability, but not purpose. And guess what? Even the data is turning against this model. According to Gallup's 2023 report, 85% of employees worldwide are either disengaged or actively miserable at work. 85%. That's not a fluke. That's a pattern. That's what happens when you design a system to care more about output than essence. So let's stop pretending burnout is just about being too busy. You burn out not because you're soft. You burn out because you're spiritually starving. Jung said, "He who has a why can bear almost any how." And yet so many of us today are drowning in the how. Emails, meetings, deadlines, but starving for a why. You do what's expected. You chase achievements you didn't choose. You follow routines that feel hollow. And when you finally pause long enough to ask, "Why am I even doing this?" you're met with silence. That silence is the wound. Burnout isn't a personal failure. It's not fixed by a vacation or a new planner. Burnout is when your soul starts waving the red flag. It's your inner self saying, "This life, this path, it doesn't belong to me." And when you ignore that voice for too long, another part of you begins to rise, the shadow. In Jungian psychology, the shadow is everything you've repressed. The anger you hide, the grief you bury, the hunger for something real. When you're forced to fake a life that doesn't align with your truth, the shadow doesn't stay quiet. It seeps into your thoughts. It makes you irritable. It makes you numb. It drains your ability to focus or care, not because you're broken, but because your inner self is screaming to be seen. That's why burnout feels so heavy. It's not just physical fatigue. It's existential fatigue. It's waking up with a full calendar, but an empty heart. You're moving, but you're not alive. And science is finally catching up to what Jung knew all along. In 2019, the World Health Organization officially classified burnout as an occupational phenomenon, not a mental disorder, but a chronic response to stress and meaninglessness in the workplace. Harvard Business Review studies show that burnout isn't primarily linked to workload. It's most strongly tied to a lack of control, recognition, and purpose. In other words, people don't break because they're doing too much. They break because what they're doing doesn't matter, at least not to them. And the saddest part? Most people will never say it out loud. They'll smile, nod, deliver results. Until one day the shadow does what they couldn't. It shuts everything down. But the system doesn't just exhaust you. It trains you to blame yourself for being tired. From the time we were kids, we were told that hard work equals virtue, that suffering is noble, that if you're unhappy, it's not the system, it's you. You're not grinding hard enough, you're not staying positive, you're not manifesting properly. This isn't motivation, it's mental conditioning. We grow up internalizing these quiet lies. If you're tired, grind harder. If you're miserable, just be more grateful. If you're falling apart, don't talk about it. And if you ever want something better, you better earn it first. They keep telling us success takes sacrifice, but they never say how much, or whether what you're sacrificing is even worth it. And little by little, we absorb this toxic equation. Pain equals progress, exhaustion equals excellence, discomfort equals character. So when we start breaking under the weight of all this, we don't question the system, we question ourselves. Carl Jung warned us about this. He believed that modern society was losing the ability to hear its own soul, that we were gaining material comfort, but losing spiritual depth. He said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." In other words, if you never examine the beliefs running your life, you'll spend decades following someone else's script and thinking it was your choice. And that script? It starts early. Think about how we treat children. We reward the ones who sit still, follow directions, and don't ask too many questions, not the ones who speak their truth, get messy, or challenge the rules. A good child isn't the most authentic, it's the most obedient. So from the very beginning, we learn, be agreeable, not honest. Be safe, not sincere. And eventually, that lesson follows us into adulthood. Our bosses replace our teachers. Our performance reviews replace report cards. And before we know it, we're adults asking, why do I feel so disconnected from my own life? A 2021 New York Times survey found nearly 70% of adults feel like they're living a life that doesn't reflect who they truly are, not because they failed, but because they succeeded at becoming someone they never wanted to be. They followed the rules, got the job, collected the credentials, and somewhere in all that success, they lost themselves. And when that realization finally lands, it doesn't feel liberating. It feels embarrassing, because we've been trained to feel ashamed for wanting more ease, for craving rest, for admitting we don't want to be strong all the time. But here's something most people never hear. Escaping that quiet misery doesn't always mean quitting your job. It means finding your way back to yourself. Because the real issue isn't always what you do, it's who you've had to become just to do it. Carl Jung believed the only way to fix that fracture is through something called individuation. It's not a trendy self-help word. It's deep, slow, inner work. It means peeling off the layers of who you were taught to be, who you perform as, who you pretend to be in meetings, and rediscovering the part of you that existed before the world told you who you had to be. Individuation is asking better questions, like, what matters to me? What do I value? What kind of impact do I want to have? Not for the algorithm, not for my LinkedIn profile, but for my soul. It doesn't always mean blowing up your life. Sometimes it means reshaping the life you already have, designing your role around what energizes you, choosing projects that match your temperament, saying no to things that drain you, even if they're expected. It might mean carving out space, even if it's just 20 minutes a day, to journal, to reflect, to create before you consume. It's not about being perfect. It's about getting closer to alignment. And when people start living like that, the results are measurable. A recent Jungian therapy study found that individuals who practiced regular individuation rituals, like daily reflection, creativity, boundary setting, saw up to a 40% drop in depressive symptoms. Why? Not because their job changed, but because they did. They stopped outsourcing their identity. They started reclaiming it. Even the greats needed that reset. Steve Jobs, after being fired from Apple, didn't immediately launch the next big thing. He stepped away, he explored, he rebuilt, and when he returned, he came back not just with better products, but with clarity. He knew who he was, and the world could feel it. That's the power of individuation. It's not escape, it's emergence. Not rebellion, it's reclamation. The process of becoming who you were always meant to be. But let's talk about what that life actually looks like, because most people are chasing a version of success that was never theirs to begin with. Somewhere along the line, we were sold a lie, that success is about external proof, titles, money, likes, status, admiration. And we believe that if we just got all those things, we'd feel whole. But many have reached the top, And instead of feeling fulfilled, they feel lost, like they spent years climbing a ladder only to realize it was leaning against the wrong wall. And that's the betrayal we're not supposed to talk about. You can win the game and still lose yourself in the process. Because real success, the kind that actually lasts, has nothing to do with applause. It has everything to do with integrity. When the noise fades, when the lights go out, when you're alone with yourself, can you say, "This life makes sense to me"? That's not about being admired. That's about being aligned. Can you wake up and say, "Even if no one understands me, I didn't betray myself just to be accepted"? That's real success. In a world obsessed with popularity, that kind of self-honesty is revolutionary. Jung called it the privilege of a lifetime, to become who you truly are, not who your parents expected, not who your job demands, not even who you thought you had to be to survive, but who you are when everything else is stripped away. And sometimes that becoming doesn't look flashy. It looks quiet, like peace after saying no, like clarity after walking away from something that looked great but felt wrong, like joy when you finally start creating something real just for the sake of being yourself. You don't need to be extraordinary. You just need to be honest. And in a world that profits off your insecurity, that kind of honesty is rare and powerful, because the world will always try to make you into someone else. It'll ask you to measure your value in numbers, to trade truth for safety, to keep your head down, your voice low, your heart tucked away. But real strength, real freedom, real peace, it comes from doing the most difficult thing of all, being yourself in a system that makes that nearly impossible. And if you've made it this far, if you've been nodding quietly, feeling something stir deep inside, it's because you already know. You were never the problem. Your exhaustion isn't failure. Your restlessness isn't dysfunction. It's awakening. It's your soul reminding you, there's more than this. Because you were never meant to shrink to fit a system that rewards silence and punishes depth. You were meant to grow, to question, to feel. And no, that doesn't make you weak. It makes you alive. If you've been carrying guilt for not thriving in a system that doesn't feed your spirit, let it go. That ache in your chest, that tug in your gut, that's not something to fix. That's something to follow. And you're not alone. This space, this channel, is for people like you. People who think too deeply, feel too much, refuse to settle for survival and call it living. Here, we explore the ancient wisdom, the hard questions, the truths modern life tries to bury, not to escape the world, but to rebuild yourself within it. So if this message hits something real in you, don't just scroll away. Subscribe. Stay curious. Stay defiant. Because this journey back to yourself, it's not a single moment. It's a way of life. And sometimes, all it takes is one voice to remind you of what you've always known.